So, today we're going to talk about a movie that doesn't come out till August 12th. It's called Hell or High Water, and it's got Chris Pine, Jeff Bridges, Ben Foster, directed by David Mackenzie. We saw it yesterday at an early release and got to sit in a Q&A with basically everyone in the cast, and the director and the writer. So we're just going to go ahead and talk about this movie. It's called Hell or High Water, and give you a non-spoiler and then spoilers review. So obviously no one's seen it, so maybe don't watch the end of this video for a while.
Unless you want to be spoiled, I guess.
Yeah. By us.
Okay. So, pre-spoilers. I thought it was really good. I thought it was really, really well written. The movie is about two brothers who decide to rob a series of banks in West Texas to pay off the mortgage of their mother's house, who's passed away.
Yeah.
And it follows the story of the two brothers and two police officers who
They're like
are
Texas Rangers,
Texas
I believe.
Rangers, yes. And they're sort of following their
trying to catch them. One is like about to retire, and one's just his partner, basically. So that's kind of the synopsis of that.
Yes. It takes place in Texas, obviously West Texas. It's very Texas-y. If you live in Texas, I think you'll really like it.
If you don't, you probably will still like it.
Yeah, it's still a great
really
movie.
well written, but you might not understand some of the stuff.
Yeah, there's some of the stuff that's very like specific to Texas, and but other than that, yeah, it's a great story. It's super well written. The writer has such a good way of making you attached to the characters in such a short amount of time. And, you know, honestly, when I first watched the trailer, I didn't think that I would really enjoy this type of movie, but
yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by how much I liked it.
It's really enjoyable. It is rated R, and there is violence in it, but not anything too crazy.
Yeah.
You know, don't take your kids to see it, but you should know that.
Yeah. But overall, we recommend this movie. It was a surprise hit.
Yeah, I was very surprised. I thought it was like just not going to be anything special, but it was super, super good, super well written, and very well directed. So go see that shit.
Okay, from this point on, it's going to be spoilers. So don't watch after this if you haven't seen it, which is probably a lot of people.
Yes. Okay, so we have some notes.
Yeah,
we took notes during the movie for the first time ever.
We were at the Alamo Draft House like we always are.
We only see movies there, let's be real.
And so they were doing a special where you could see the movie and then stay for a Q&A, which was actually live in Austin. And I believe it was at South Lamar, which would probably be the most logical choice. But it could have really been at any of them.
Yeah.
It was not at the Ritz.
Yeah, that's the only one that I know.
For sure. It was not. But yeah, they had like everyone there, and they were all drunk.
They were all really drunk. They did sort of an intro before where they welcomed everyone, and the director sort of spoke about it for a second, and you could tell that they were all already drinking. Then by the time the movie was over and they came out for the Q&A, they were all just obliterated.
Yeah, Chris Pine was holding like some kind of, it looked like either some kind of tequila drink or some like gin and tonic or something, and he was like holding that in the intro, and then afterwards he was just gone, because he literally was gone. He like didn't come back for a while. Like after they were introducing everyone back, they were like, where's Chris? And then he just appears and he's like, no more tequila for me. And then he continued to drink throughout the rest of the Q&A.
Yes, so a lot of them were basically useless. So I will say the writer, who was also clearly very drunk, was super well spoken despite being like really drunk. I was like, I'm very impressed with your ability to like give a well formed and like very nice answer to some very complicated questions.
He was just decided that they were gonna take over the Q&A and not really answer the questions the guy was trying to get them to answer. They were just gonna tell stories.
Which was a great
And he just told the story about how he got the idea for the waitress in the movie, who's kind of really sassy and whatever.
Yeah, the What Don't You Want waitress, if you've seen the movie, which is based off of a true story that him and his dad went to a restaurant and had a woman say that, and then they actually kicked them out of the restaurant because they couldn't decide what they didn't want soon enough. So
it was really funny, and some people might consider that unprofessional, but I really enjoyed everyone being drunk.
I feel like Q&As are usually really uncomfortable, really awkward, and I feel like now I wish that every Q&A was just done.
Yeah, because they were just talking and they were having a good
Chris
time.
Pine was useless. Everybody else gave really great answers, and Chris Pine just kept talking about wanting to adopt Jeff Bridges.
Yeah, he was basically useless, but he was so cute and sweet and adorable that we were so mad we weren't in Austin and we were in Dallas watching it because we were dang, we were so close. They have a lot of fun Texas references that you'll only will get if you're in Texas. They've got Lone Star and Shiner Bob.
Yeah, and they go to Oklahoma at one point, and he's like, "Oh, I want Dr. Pepper," and then he buys a Mr. Pibb. And he's like, "Oh, you're trying to kill me, getting me Mr. Pibb," which is such a because Dr. Pepper was created in Waco, which is in Texas, obviously, so it's such a Texas thing.
Yeah, and they go to the casinos, and they have a lot of interesting dynamics about Native Americans and people in Texas, and then just
it's heavily about sort of social issues that are really prevalent. I feel in Texas, it's heavily about people that are basically screwed over by the bank system and given loans to be kept poor, so that they can basically take their houses,
so that they can use them for oil, which is what they want.
Yes. And it was really interesting to see that, see somebody give a voice to such an interesting subject. I feel you don't really see a lot. You just see, whenever you see someone that's oh, well, we're going to put people in there that are really poor, all you see is, the crime aspect of it. But in this one, it's okay, we're going to have the crime aspect of it, but you're really going to understand why they're doing this.
Yeah, because, the one brother, Toby, is a straight-laced guy, as they come, and he's just doing this to help his family and his sons get the things that they need, because he basically gives a speech about poverty is a disease and it's infected my family for hundreds of years, and my kids aren't going to have to deal with that anymore, because now they have this oil drills on their land and the land is theirs, no one can take it away, it's in a trust. And
I felt that speech that he gives at the end where he talks about how it's a disease for his family was a really good way to describe how it is to live in that much of poverty, not to the point that you just cannot get out of it. And so I thought that was really, really good. And that guy, obviously it's about the two brothers. That brother is straight-laced, and his other brother is...
It's more of a criminal type.
He was in prison. He shot their father.
But he did it for, I feel the sheriff, played by Jeff Bridges, doesn't really understand the other brother, but we as audience members really get to understand the other brother, who shoots his father because he was beating them mercilessly, and no one was going to do anything about it. And so he basically shoots him in a hunting accident in the barn. So, obviously it wasn't anything. But, then he goes to prison for assault and stuff, and you can tell that a lot of that is built up from being abused as a kid and living in this poverty, and
and having a mother that sort of disowns him in a way because she's just
embarrassed or whatever, whatever it is. And then he you think the sheriff thinks that his motivation was just to have money to spend on jet skis and fancy stuff, and just so he had robbed
when really
some more.
He did it mostly for his brother, because his brother had asked him to do it.
Yeah, because his brother wanted to make this life for his kids, which was why in the end the other brother takes the bullet, for the crimes, and he knows, I think, going in that they're never going to get away with it, per se, that one of them is going to have to pay for it.
Right, and I think he, understands to a certain degree that he almost, deserves it. Especially when he starts to, murder people, and you get him, killing the two people in the bank, and then, shooting the police officers, and he's sort of, king of the plains, but you could tell that he's, ready to die in a way where he's like, I have gotten to the point where I deserve this.
Yeah,
and my brother obviously does.
Yeah, because he looks back to where Jeff Bridges' character is waiting to snipe him, basically, and he like looks back, and you're almost thinking that maybe he's gonna see him and duck or something, but he just like is there, and then he gets shot.
Right.
And then they have a lot of really good symbolism, like when he dies, there's a rattlesnake by him, so it's like everything was gonna catch up to him anyways.
Yes.
And like in the end, like Jeff Bridges' character like drives away in this like sunset, which is reminiscent of like all the scenes of the two brothers driving their different cars. And like,
yeah, and it's sort of a closing out of like the like, you know, sunsetting on the story, and like, okay, well now I've like laid this to rest, even though he says he's gonna like continue to go after the other brother because he knows that he's the other like criminal. Even though the rest of the police force is like, no, he's not a suspect. But it's sort of like a closing out, like, okay, now that I see, like, your family and, like, why you've kind of done this, it's sort of like an understanding and, like, you can begin to move on from it.
Yeah, and then, like, everyone kind of protects Toby in the end, which is, like, Chris Pine's character, because they're like, well, the bank protects him because now he's put all this money into the bank. Like, they sold it up, like, $40,000, and now he's putting $50,000 in every month because of this oil trust that he's made for his sons. And then, like, the waitress protects him because they stole her money.
Yes.
And so she was like, no, I don't recognize that guy. And then the other old guy was like, probably didn't even really see them. So he was just like, yeah, I saw them. They were, you know, dressed in checkered shirts. And you're like, okay.
So everybody in Texas could have been that guy.
Yeah, and then, like, obviously the attorney really stood for them because he was like, oh, you're paying them back with their own money, and, like, you could tell he was really passionate about helping them out because the banks were legitimately just screwing people over, and, like, nobody really cared, and even the old guy at that one point was like, yeah, I watched the bank get robbed, or, like, something, and he was like they've been robbing me for years, and you're like, could really tell all this like camaraderie with like basically the bank's getting screwed. Like,
yeah, and that like specific bank especially because they rob a lot of the like Texas Midland Bank or whatever it is.
Just like a small, like I think they only have 8 branches or something. They're only in Texas, so they kind of like really talks about like that, and like they have signs that they drive by that are like, need debt help, like get out of debt, you know, that are like all across the like roads, which is like interesting. But yeah, I liked how the like bank interacted with him when they like paid them off, like where he was like, well, I can get that done for you by the end of the week. He's like, it is the end of the week, I'll just wait. And the guy was just like faxing. He's like, like obviously like super uncomfortable and like doesn't really know what to do, and I like really liked that. And then like when Jeff Bridges' character is like talking to the girl that like worked as a teller, and then he was like, oh, that looks like a guy that would like give out a mortgage, and he like goes and talks to like the bank manager or something. And I was like, I liked the way they interacted with like all the bank people.
Right, exactly. It's sort of like, yeah, we're trying to solve this crime, but even the sheriff sort of have an understanding of like what's going on.
Yeah.
And like how people are feeling in this way. I will say, like, and we talked about this earlier, how I really liked the way that they did the violence in the movie, because there are some scenes that are like surprisingly violent, like they took me by surprise, but I didn't feel like they were overplayed in any way. I felt like it was really realistic, and I didn't feel like they used it like a lot of movies will use violence as like, you know, they're going to use this to ride out for this entire scene instead of like, oh, we actually have to write this. I'm just going to have like a bunch of needless violence. I felt like the violence was really understandable and like just really well placed.
Yeah. Because, like, having his partner get killed and not him was just, like, it was leading up to that because they were having talks about, oh, we might get into a shootout, you might die, like, Jeff Bridges' character might die. And then, you know, Gil Birmingham's character kind of, like, says at one point, like, I would give anything to, like, be in your position where I get to retire from this job because not a lot of people make it out of it. And so you're like, something's going to happen, and then you don't really expect it's going to be him that dies, Gil Birmingham's character, but then he does, and you're like...
It's, like, devastating.
Yeah, like, it was, like, really sad and shocking, because you're like,
Whenever
Like,
you hear so much about the way he talks about it, it's like you really come to like love his character a lot, I feel like. And so when he gets killed, what are you doing?
stop that.
Yeah, when he like gets killed, it's just like devastating. It's just like you feel that like pain of like when his partner sees that he's dead, and he's like dead immediately. There's no like last word scene. It's just like shot in the head and gone. And you can see like him being devastated by it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was like a really, really good scene.
Yeah, it was just like, you could kind of see their relationship working out, and at first maybe you're like thinking, oh, his partner doesn't really like him, Jeff Bridges, because he's like always saying these like mildly racist things about Native Americans. But at the end, you can tell that they both really like each other. Like when, Gil Birmingham's character comes and gives him coffee because he's been like sleeping out front of the like diner all night, and like, checking up on him kind of.
Right. So they have a lot of banter, and some of it is kind of racist.
Yeah.
But you understand at the end where it was like, well, they genuinely really cared about each other.
Yeah, because he was like, Jeff Bridges was like, oh yeah, like you're gonna miss me, like picking on you all the time, basically, when I'm gone. And then it turns out that, he's the one, Gil Birmingham's the one that dies, kind of, I was just like, oh, that's sad.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, didn't sign up for this Fields trip.
Yeah, but it was just like a really interesting perspective on like West Texas, the poor in West Texas, and it really is like that. Like it really is.
Yeah.
Like if you've ever driven up to Lubbock, or you've driven like through Texas to like New Mexico, it's just like that. Like there's plains and plains of like nothing, and then there's like rusted up like cars and like things that look like they're probably closed but really could be open from, and like all these like little sleepy towns.
Right. That's like one of the things I really liked when they are in the like one town with the waitress woman. It's like, what don't you want? And they talk about, it's like, why would you want to live here? They have like the hardware store that charges twice as much as Home Depot, and they like throw a point out all their stuff in the town. And he's like, how can you make a living here? And it's just like, well, you can't. Like basically, you just you're stuck.
You're stuck there because there's no other way to go. So you have this waitress that's just trying to pay her mortgage to keep the roof over her head, being a waitress in this like little town, and like all these different people that are just like talking about like their lifestyle. And you have this other waitress that's way older than the original, like the younger waitress, and she's very disillusioned and just like, what don't you want? And like
sort of like hardened from being in this like lifestyle for so long.
Yeah, she's like, I want you to eat your food and I want you to leave, and I'm not gonna get fired, but it doesn't matter what I say to you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, and she's like, there's no way out. Like it's almost like a way of like, there's no way out for me, so I can act and do whatever I want. Like, and not that she was like particularly mean, she was just like straight to business, like gruff almost.
Yeah.
And so you're like, and you do meet a lot of like people like that, but I liked how like very strongly they portrayed the two waitress women. They were both like very strong women. They were like
I really liked that because you get so much from these characters that have like really short scenes. And like just in those short scenes, you have like a really deep understanding of what this person is probably like and what their life has been and is like.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so cool, like being able to see something like that in just like one scene or like 2 or 3 scenes.
Yeah, because you have like this young waitress who's just like a little flirty, kind of fun, and then she's trying to help out Toby's character by being like, well, we could use a cook, like if you need a job, like she's trying to help him out, and then he ends up leaving her like a $200 tip, and so then she feels a certain sense of loyalty to him because he was, trying to help her out, and then, they try to like take that money, like Jeff Bridges' character tries to take the money from her as evidence. And she's like, no, you're not going to take it. You can go out there, you can get a warrant, you can do whatever you want, but until that point, this is my money that's going to keep the roof over my head and my daughter's head and stuff. And I was like, I really like this because she's like, you just get a lot from the 2 scenes that she's in. It's
Right,
just
and I think it was interesting when they like talked about it at the end, where it was like, well, the waitress you took the tips from, which is like, okay, they did end up getting the tips from her, didn't rat out the other brother, where it's like, okay, well, you know, when you go against someone that's like really just trying to provide their family, they haven't really done anything wrong, and you basically steal from them, you know, they're not gonna take down someone that they feel is like innocent.
Yeah, like a Robin Hood almost type character, where he was taking from these banks and giving to
people
other
who really
people.
needed it.
Yeah. So it was interesting, like the end where they were like, we don't have anything on Toby, like he's straight laced, he has no record. You know, like the waitress said she didn't recognize him. This other guy said he didn't recognize him. Like and then the bank was even more uncooperative than his attorney because he put this giant trust in the bank. So now the bank's like, literally, we don't care if you fucking robbed us like 2 days ago. Like, now you're putting in $50,000 every single month until this oil draws up. So that's amazing for us, and that's way more than the $40,000 you took from us. And it's like Jeff Bridges' character spends like a lot of time contemplating why they did this, because he's like, oh, why did you steal $40,000 when now you're making $50 every month and like more than you did? And it's almost like Jeff Bridges' character doesn't understand that he like didn't own this land almost. Like,
he was gonna lose it, like,
and then he was gonna lose like all of this other, you know, the income that it was gonna give to his like sons and
right. And I really like the scene where he goes to the bank to pay him, and he pays him like, you know, they were gonna foreclose on the house like that day, and he's like, this is in the nick of time, and you can tell like how angry he is that he like.
Yeah.
And then he does the thing like, oh yeah, we like paid this, you know, just for really good for our customers, and he's just like staring at him like, we all know that's a fucking lie.
Yeah, you paid those so that you can take that land and then use it to make money.
Yeah.
Like, or sell it yourself, like to like Chevron or something, and then he gets to do that, and then he gets to make money. And I like the way that he interacts with his ex-wife, because I feel like a lot of times people will portray like divorced people as being like fighting all the time and blah blah blah, and they were just kind of like
you could tell that they had been through a lot of hard stuff, like a lot of hardships, but like they still had like a very deep like love and respect for each other, I think, which is like really interesting.
So I like that, because she wasn't like mean to him, like he was like, well, I'm going to give them the ranch, like it belongs to them, and she's just like, oh, another thing for me to take care of. But then he's like helping her fix the house,
right?
And he's coming
and she's
back.
not like mean in any way. I feel like it's like she's just been hardened, just like everybody else in the story, by having to like support, you know, raise 2 boys and like try and support all of them and like do all of this stuff that's like really difficult. So it's like you can tell that she's not trying to be cruel. She's just like had a really hard life.
Yeah, and it seems like maybe in the end their divorce was just because of their like poverty and like all this other stuff. Like, and I was like, that I like the way that you portrayed this, like where you don't have like 2, they're like fighting, and she wasn't like some like trash woman or anything. She was just like a nice lady who's
just like trying her best, really.
Yeah. So,
and that's kind of how we feel about the other character too, where it's like, okay, you never see your sons, but you can also understand like, you know, you're really just doing the best that you can with the cards that you were given.
Yeah, and he doesn't see them because he can't pay the child support, and if he goes to see them without the child support, like, she's angry about that, but it's because she needs the money. Like, she needs it. It's not like, oh, I just think he's a deadbeat and he's a shit dad or something. It's like, she's going to be angry if he goes without money because she desperately needs the money.
Right.
So
I really liked the way that they talked about their mother's death. Where it was like more like through clues than it was a direct story. Like you never see her, but you see like the bed, and it's like how long was she in the bed for, and like all this stuff. And did you take the boys to the funeral? And it was such a like interesting way, because it's like that's how people like this would really talk about it. You know, they wouldn't be like really weepy. It would be like, well, you know, like the ex-wife says like good riddance, like after she dies.
Yeah, she's like, but in the best way, kind of like she says it in like basically says that like good riddance. She's like, I mean that in the best sense of like, you know, your mom was suffering and all this other stuff. And
right.
So it was kind of, I liked that too. And I like the soundtrack. The soundtrack.
Yeah,
really
I wrote
good.
something about the soundtrack on my thing where like it kind of reminded me of like the soundtrack from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou at times.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of it that kind of reminded me of that movie, like different stuff that I was like, oh, that kind of reminds me of it. And I really love that movie, so I thought it was really cool. And the music, yeah, was like really, really good. And I don't know, they really utilize the music and the landscape well together in a way where you kind of get, like, you really feel like you're in this story and, like, with these people. And, like,
it was really, really good. And then they, like, come up with this idea to go up to these casinos and then pretend they won all this money, and I was like, you guys really thought this out. Like, it was like an interest, like a very well planned, and then it was satisfying that the other brother got away and like was just able to help his family.
Yeah, and he didn't even keep the house, he didn't even live there.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like really just interesting. It makes you like satisfied because you're like, this other brother has to die. Like, as you see him do stuff where you're like, I understand why you're doing it, but you're also not a good person. Like when he like assaults that woman, or when he's just like causing like fights with people, and he's like, you know, kind of an adrenaline junkie. Like he just like on the mark, like robs one bank like without telling his brother, and he like, you know, kills people without remorse. And so you kind of like, you're like, you know, I kind of understand why you're doing this, but you also like, you need to die for this story to like close out in a way that's satisfying.
Yeah.
And the other brother like getting away with it, you're like, this is like good. Like I feel good about the way that this story ended.
Yeah. So it was just overall like very well written, very good, and it just had those like little nuances of like Texas life that if you've lived here, like the guy riding the horse that's like at the gas station.
I wrote that down too. Yeah, I was like, really? And I loved the scene where they're at like this gas station and these guys pull up and it's like green like Camaro or something, and they're like little like douche canoes, and the guy's just like sitting there like he looks like he's asleep almost. And he's like, what are you looking at? And he like pulls out his gun, and then his other brother, like Chris Pine's character, comes out and just like beats the shit out of him.
And then
his friend's like, he had it coming.
He had it coming.
Yeah. And I was like, this is so funny because I'm like, this is literally like so much of what you see is like you see these people that are super like redneck and stuff, and you see these people who get like the little like smidge of money, and all of a sudden they're like, I'm gonna spend it on all these like flashy cars and stuff, and just be like a huge like douche canoe about it. Because I've lived my entire life in poverty. Like they don't know how to like go from that to like having a little bit of money, and so they like spend it recklessly and act reckless.
And there's a lot of like scenes that are like the old guy is in the bank when they're robbing one of the Texas Midland branches, and they're like, do you have a gun? He's like, of course I've got a gun. And then he's like, oh, you guys, you know, like they say things that are racist, but in a way where you like can understand that they're saying them because they're older, they're from an older generation, they're from these towns, and it's not so much like an actual racism, it's like that.
Yeah, they're not saying it in like a hateful way, like when he's like robbing that guy and he's like, oh, what, you guys aren't even Mexicans and stuff, or you're like, I could totally imagine some like old Texas dude like saying that and not even realizing that that's like offensive because he's not meaning it to be offensive.
It's just like a statement almost. It's like the way that like you have those old people that are like, oh, you're so, you know, nice for like whatever, insert whatever.
Yeah, you're
like,
so well spoken for, you know.
And they don't mean it in a way where they're trying to really be offensive. It's just in a way where like
they just like don't really understand.
And they've maybe lived in a town that's like 100% like one race or something, or you know, they're just from a town like these little like so sleepy, like the sleepiest little towns that you can think of where almost nothing is there at all. Like you might have one like grocery store, and like one gas station.
Your grocery store is basically the gas station that you shop at.
It's like the only place that these people can go. You maybe have some small little like shops, but they don't stay open, so most of them are closed because nobody's there to buy anything, and it's so sleepy that it's like. I liked the way he portrayed that in a way where they're saying things that are like that's offensive, or that could be offensive depending on who you're talking to, and then it's like, but you can tell the characters in themselves are like not hateful. They're just like, you know, even Jeff Bridges is saying this stuff to his partner, and it's like, that's, you know, he's saying stuff about like, you know, riding through the plains, like, don't you like dance around fires and like whoop and holler, and like he's like, no, I'm Catholic, like, you know, like those kind of things, and it's just like I don't know, I liked it, and it's like hard to describe because I feel like most people are like, that's unacceptable no matter what. But if you put yourself in like this time, this place, like these people where they grew up, and you can understand that, you can understand that they can say things that are not really okay, but like they're not saying it in a way where you're like,
yeah, they're trying to be like hateful.
Yeah, they're not gonna go and like shoot someone just because they're like another race or anything. They're just like saying this is
just like random statements of fact.
Yeah, and I liked that. And there was so much like, oh, everyone had a gun at one point. Like they robbed this bank, and there's just like people outside like trying to shoot them and then chasing after them with their guns and stuff. And you're just like,
this is totally something that would happen. Like
yeah,
on, like,
West
trucks.
Texas.
Yeah.
And they've got these,
I really liked how the writer Taylor talked about his like idea for this. Like, he obviously talks about the waitress, but I liked how he talked about how he had like his like cousin and so many people of his family that had been like the sheriff and this one, you know.
Yeah, like federal marshals for like a certain area in like Central Texas.
And how he talked when he was like one cousin they really looked up to, and that was just like, he kind of described him as so pure because he was able to just like, you know, like look at him and he would want to like confess everything that he had ever done, and how he was like forced into retirement, and he had seen this happen to like so many people, and he was like, it really gave me an idea of like how a lot of people in Texas are, where it's like they aren't just gonna like give up, they like fight to get back.
Yeah, they have a lot of strength and they're fighters, and then they just like have this drive to keep things, especially like in Texas. I feel like there's so many people that if they have land, they won't give that land up for anything.
Yeah.
Like, they just won't. Like, there's so many people I've met personally that are like, oh, I have this ranch, or I have, like, all this acreage, and it's like, I'm like, all right, would you ever sell it? And they're like, no. They, like, look at you like that's the most absurd question. Like, would you ever sell your part of the land? They're like, no. Like, we have this, like, trust in line. Like, if anybody wants to sell this land, like, we're, you know, like, the other people that are in the trust, like, get the chance to buy it first, and it's like, I'm gonna buy it all. Like, you're like, what are you gonna do with this?
Yeah.
But I mean, like, they just have like this deep attachment to the land that they're on and the towns
which is
that
very
they live
like,
in, and
it's almost like watching a Western. Like, you know, you get this idea of like, oh, once people have their land, like that's their like stake. That's like their like claim on the world, and you really still get this, and that's like so realistic. I feel like one of the things is like, if you were watching this and you had not grown up like in the South or around this stuff, you might think that this movie is just full of like dumb stereotypes, but a lot of it is like very accurate as to how people are.
They have this like deep-rooted sense of connection to like the place they grew up. That's why you get all these people that are like, I'm never gonna move out of Texas. I'm never gonna move anywhere else. And like, you know, if you move in from out of state, you're like, why? You know, like maybe. But once you live here long enough, you get that. Like, you're like,
understand like where that loyalty comes from.
And then you like, anybody tries to like, you feel like Sandy from SpongeBob, where somebody's like, Texas sucks, and you're like, what did you say?
Like, yeah, you just like, there's such a like deep loyalty that like runs in the South in general, but in Texas more than anything. Yeah, and I feel like that was so well portrayed in this movie, not in a way that was like, you know, belittled anybody's beliefs or made them seem like stupid or like, oh, well, why don't you just do this? It was like, you understand why they have this deep love and connection for where they live.
Yeah, and to their guns. There's a lot of like, you could tell, like, they're like, oh, I'm gonna go out and shoot them myself, like, if I see them, and like, I'll hang them up
like,
on...
to the Texas Rangers.
There's a guy at one point that says something basically along the lines of, I'm gonna go kill them if I find them, and, you know, like, the Texas Ranger was like, oh, well, you know, if that's probably going to end worse for you than it is for them. And he's like, not if you can't find where I put them or whatever.
If you can't find the tree.
Yeah, and I was like, this is such a thing that somebody would, like, say.
Like, just straight up say to, like, a Texas Ranger that's just, like, doesn't even do anything about it. He's just like,
he's like, okay.
This is how people are.
Go on your way, you know, and we got, like, the like cattle drive that's going on, which like still happens, and a lot of people I feel like don't realize people still ride horses to round up their cattle in Texas.
I love
and
that
anywhere.
scene too, where he's like, it's freaking 2016, and I'm trying to like, you know, get a bunch of cattle across the land, and he was like, now I wonder It's like, no wonder my kids don't want to do this for a living. And he's like talking about it. And I'm like, it's so like.
Yeah, it's so accurate because like you don't really think about it. They're like, well, why don't they jump in cars? I'm like, well, cattle are really easily spooked. Like they are, you turn on an engine and you're driving towards them, they might very well like ditch themselves in a ravine or something.
Yeah.
So like that's why they use horses, because it's quieter and they can more easily like stream them along. And I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, cattle died out like forever ago, and I'm like, no,
Like,
they didn't.
Still got to do that.
You know, like there's still people that have to like move their cattle from like field to field and like different stuff. So yeah, they still use horses usually. Like they might use some other means, but I think most of the time it's still horses. And I'm like, it's kind of interesting because that's where you get that like kind of connection to everything, is because they're still really working the land.
Yeah.
They're still doing all
You have this
stuff.
mixture of like old and new. Like it's, you know, the new age and they have all this, some like places of technology, but then you have the banks that have like cameras that don't actually connect to anything.
Yeah.
Like,
and the one bank that's like, why wouldn't our cameras work? Like what kind of bank would we be? You know, and you're like, a Texas Midland bank. Like,
yeah.
their cameras don't work, and you're like, it's just, it's pretty cool. It's just a really, really interesting portrayal of like things. And then like obviously you're watching it, we watched it with a bunch of people that are from Texas, and like everyone in Austin, and you know, you're just like, oh, and like everyone was just like, yeah, like that's yeah.
Yeah. So anyways,
it was a really good movie.
go check it out. I guess we'll close this out.
Yeah, so it comes out August 12th. This might have already come out. It depends on when we post this.
Yeah. Go see it if you get the chance. It's really, really enjoyable. Very good movie.
Yeah, watch.
And let us know what you think after
Yeah.
you see it, because we really, really would love to hear your opinion about it.
Yeah, so this is us signing out on another review.